The VW Rabbit comes from a time and a place where hatchbacks were king. While it's very basic by today's standards, it offers such a compelling package in the used car market that if you're shopping for a sub $8,000 car right now, this shouldn't be ignored, and I'll show you why.
If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. That way you get quality content and I get closer to making this my long-term career. Thank you. Now back to the review.
While other markets did get different trims, here in the United States, we just had one. It was the S, along with a really cool shooting brake. Well, that's kind of excessive. It was a two-door hatchback. Came as standard. The four-door was optional and gave you a few more features like body-colored moldings around the vehicle. Now, of course, if you wanted a more aggressive Rabbit or Mk5, you could get the GTI, which will come with a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, producing around 200 horsepower. And then you had the R32, which was available only for the 2008 model year here at least, and that came with a VR6 engine and 256 horsepower around that.
Both of those cars are great. I even reviewed the R32 when I started the channel and found it to be awesome. Just like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, it's easy for the pleasant Rabbit to be overshadowed by its exceptional brothers, but it offered its own unique proposition too. While looks are subjective, the Rabbit has less flair than people that join dating websites for dog owners. But it has the right proportions and keeps it classy, especially with the two-door. So much so that I'm having a hard time thinking of a better looking cheap hatchback. It looks good in the same way that the E46 BMW did, especially with this subtle sage green. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section. The Rabbit here is a museum piece with only 36,000 miles and a pristine interior, and it's available at Royal on the East Side. Royal East is a friendly dealership in Bloomington, Indiana. If you're looking for something new, used, or just plain cool, check them out.
And around the side of the Rabbit, the clean looks continue. You have huge windows here that provide excellent visibility outside of the somewhat thick C-pillar there. When it comes to the wheels, you had 15-inch rims as standard, with plenty of sidewall there to soak up all those bumps and imperfections. You did have an option for 16-inch alloys on both the two-door and the four-door. And the release for the hatchback is actually the VW badge. It flips up, which is a cool touch, and they still do that today. I like the look of the body-colored moldings, door handles, and mirrors of my tester here. And also the dual exit exhaust is a nice touch on an otherwise pretty basic design. And this higher quality yet simple look continues on the inside. While it looks basic, the interior of the VW Rabbit feels exactly the way that I'd want a affordable car too. There's not an abundance of soft touch materials. However, there is a soft place to rest each one of your elbows. I do wish that the door side continued a little bit further back here for taller drivers. The seats, while leather wasn't offered, come with a lumbar adjustment, plus the ability to electronically recline, which I guess allows you to easier adjust yourself while you're driving.
But this was only for four-door buyers. Coupe owners made do with just a 6-way adjustable seat. The steering wheel, while incredibly basic, tilts and telescopes. This isn't as comfortable as a modern Mazda 3 or Jetta, but it checks enough boxes to where it works for a large amount of people. Plus, the layout is so simple that Bachelor fans could figure it out. The buttons and dials have a satisfying but not premium feel to them. After getting out of the new GTI, this is refreshing. There's even dedicated dials for the equalizer.
Honestly, this sound system is very surprising. You'll get 8 speakers with the two-door model and 10 if you get the four-door, and it actually sounds pretty good. I mean, it gets a lot louder and has more power than what I have ever experienced with a cheaper car of this era. Even better than my old Civic Si, which had a subwoofer. Still, at higher volumes, it's not going to provide the most refined sound, but I think cheaper car buyers will really like this. Also, all of them came with an auxiliary input, which you access by hitting the CD button and plugging in the glove compartment. The gauge cluster is beautifully simple, and it's very easy to read. And while I prefer to have some steering wheel controls here on the wheel, all you have is 2 stalks, and you still can control the lights, the wipers, and the cruise control, which is standard. There's just not much going on, but in a good way. In fact, my only real complaint about this interior is that it can be a little dreary just with all the black plastics. Still, the fit and finish in here is really good, and none of these plastics feel too cheap like what you would find in a Mitsubishi or a Kia of this era. Plus, if you want to stress out some cup holders, you can put a 40-ounce hydro flask here in the door pocket. And the center console has a height adjustable ratchet motion and provides a little bit of extra storage as well. Plus, me being 6'3", I have plenty of space here for myself. When it comes to other options that were available for this car, really there wasn't a whole lot. You had AC as standard, and heated seats were optional on the 2-door, standard on the 4-door.
Plus a sunroof was available on only the 4-door. The major highlight here is build quality and ease of use. The doors are reassuring. The panels feel sturdy, and the interior exudes a durable, straightforward vibe like the name Ace, or Odin. And it might be the best small car for long highway travel in this price range.
Behind myself, I have just as much space as I do in the Mark 8 GTI. Yeah, my knees have to swing out on the side here a little bit just to clear it, but with my height, this is pretty acceptable. I do wish there was a little bit more thigh support. Maybe they angled the rear seat a little bit differently, but this is still road trip worthy even for me. Plus, you still have a soft touch place to rest your elbows. And if you got the 4-door model, you also had rear vents.
4-door buyers also got a rear center armrest and a ski pass-through from the cargo area. But you still have roughly the same space whether you go 2-door or 4-door, and both have storage compartments and cup holders back here.
The back of the VW Rabbit is more than competent for this era. It's pretty tall since there isn't, a very sharp sloping roof design. Once you fold down the seats, you have a large area to work with that could even rival some small SUVs. While there isn't a huge emotion factor with the exterior or interior of the VW Rabbit, let's take this thing out on the road and see if it can increase our heart rate that way. Now that I'm behind the wheel of the Mk5 Volkswagen Rabbit or Golf, I found that this car embodies the public's perception of what a VW is better than pretty much any other VW that I've driven recently. And if you don't already, I think you'll understand what I mean by the end of this. This is going to be packing a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 5-cylinder engine. Whenever the car first came to the States in 2006, it had 150 horsepower, but for the 2008 model year, which I'm driving right now, it makes 170 horsepower, which is actually more than a new VW Jetta. And I compare it to that because they don't even make the Golf here in the US anymore, only the GTI and R. Now in other markets, you had things like a 2-liter diesel and a 1.4-liter turbocharged and supercharged engine, and those made outputs at 140 and 170 horsepower, but I really don't know too much about those European spec cars. Here, the 2.5 liter is potent enough, especially once you start to get into higher RPMs. And while it mostly works in the background, the 5-cylinder tone is a little bit more reassuring and just honestly nicer sounding than a traditional 4-cylinder. And when it comes to shifts from this 6-speed automatic, they are super smooth. It doesn't draw much attention to itself. You do have a manual shifting option, which is nice, especially for this year, and there is a sport mode as well. But this was optional. Standard, these cars had a 5-speed manual, which I think would make for a great daily driver. Okay, so we're gonna do a quick 0 to 60 test. You do have traction control standard in every year. It comes in the form of the ASR button, which is anti-slip regulation for the nerds out there. I'm also shutting off AC, and I'm just gonna put it in sport mode. That sounds kind of nice. All right.
My apologies for the lack of a GoPro shot for that 0 to 60. I made another run with the GoPro working and in normal mode, and it matched the 0 to 60 with 8.5 seconds, which is actually on par with what the new Jetta manages, and manuals are even quicker. The charismatic engine note and extra passing power come at the cost of fuel economy. It's on par with the Mazda 3 hatch of its day, but it lags behind some other key players. At speeds of 80 miles per hour, this doesn't feel as planted as a Passat or a luxury car, but it is more stable than most of the class, and the extra displacement helps the Rabbit work less on the highway.
This is one of those cases where I would actually put a catback exhaust on an economy car like this to give this thing more of a voice. And then when it comes to overall road noise, this is more than reasonable. It's not going to fool you into thinking it's a luxury car, but if you compare this to modern small cars, it's only a little bit louder. And cruising at 70 here, the revs are still below 2,500 RPMs. This would be a more than comfortable cruiser.
And you can cruise with peace of mind too, as all came with side curtain airbags as standard, along with a 5-star side crash rating.
These seats don't have the perfect contour for a human body. However, they are still pretty supportive.
And they have enough bolstering to where I'm not being thrown about on a windy road. Speaking of which, on this more twisty, rough back road, the Rabbit and its 15-inch wheels remain unbothered by most pavement, but it lacks the fun factor of later Golf models.
There's a very slight creaking coming from somewhere from the cabin, but overall this feels very well planted. This does have 4-wheel independent suspension, and while this thing is definitely softer than what I think I would probably prefer, it does go over everything with a pretty good level of composure, and it feels confident. I think it definitely feels more comfortable than a Civic or a Mazda 3 of this generation. However, the steering is definitely slower. It feels like it has a little bit more body roll than both of those cars. And really, I was expecting a little bit more steering feedback. It's not atrocious or anything, and it's got a decent weight to it. I think if you paired this up with a 5-speed manual, I'd probably have a little bit bigger grin on my face than I do right now. Overall, behind the wheel, this has a more substantial feeling than what I was expecting. It's also not as fun as I was anticipating. When I think about the public's perception of VW as a brand, people associate it with good build quality, which this definitely has. They associate it with a straightforward, well-engineered product.
And I'd agree with that here too, especially when it comes to road manners and its confidence at higher speed and on rougher roads, relative to the segment.
I might wish that it was a little bit more zesty, but as far as a compact car package goes, this is going to be a pretty compelling one on the used car market, especially when you consider the last aspect that a lot of people misinterpret about VWs, and that's that they are reliable. Most of the time they're but this was actually a fairly dependable car.
And I'm underselling it there. Really, some had issues with the evap or charcoal canister that would cause the vehicle to stall, and others reported some minor electrical woes relating to the brake lights, AC, and radiator. But these are quite reliable, more so than a similar year Mazda 3 or Honda Civic. However, it's a used car. Things do break and parts will need to be replaced, and these have more expensive parts on average. I'd try to avoid the first model years as they had a higher volume of issues. If you want the lowest running costs in this segment, I might point you toward a Toyota Matrix or Pontiac Vibe. Just avoid the 2009 models for oil consumption and maybe consider a Honda Fit too. But this is going to feel much more solid and is a more comfortable car than all of those. The Mk5 is like Keanu Reeves in real life. The movies and media paint him as this cool guy with a heart, but when you hear stories about him in public, he turns out to actually be a cool guy with a heart. The Rabbit is a German hatchback that lives up to its legacy. It does not only feel solid, it is solid. It's comfortable, straightforward, practical, and drives with confidence. Pair that up with a simple, timeless style, and you have what I always thought a VW hatch should be. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. I'll catch you in the next one.